Hey everyone, we're here today for another fundamentals video, and this time we're going to focus on the canvas. The unified canvas is one of the features that makes InvokeAI capable of supporting an end-to-end workflow for realizing your creative vision. We'll start by going through some of the features that are available inside of the canvas, discuss how the canvas operates. We'll do a live demonstration of using the tool, and then maybe we'll just have some fun. So let's get started. The first thing that we'll talk about today is the bounding box. The bounding box is really one of the most important features of the canvas because it is what controls where and how you're going to generate new imagery and content inside of the tool. In this example, I've got a space fighter that I've created and the bounding box is selecting the whole image. So I could go in and edit parts and pieces of this as I see fit. But once we start getting into larger imagery, or if we want to do fine detailed work, we're going to want to move that bounding box around and resize it up and down in order to create better compositions. The bounding box is controlled by the Move button at the top toolbar, but the best way to get in the habit of using the bounding box is by pressing the V hotkey. This will make the bounding box selectable, and you can then drag it around using the side or resize it using the handles. An important thing to understand about the bounding box is that when we resize it and focus on a specific area rather than the entire image, we're very much limiting what the AI model is able to see when we're working with that image. In this example, I've brought the bounding box into a smaller area around the space fighter's cockpit. And if we were to generate, what the AI model will be passed is a much smaller image without any of the context around it. As we've talked about in other fundamentals videos, the denoising process is about providing the right type of context and structural hints in the initial image in order to help the model understand how to make your prompt work with what it's seeing. It's kind of squinting at this little tiny picture that you're providing and trying to figure out what exactly is it? How can I make this look like the prompt that I've been given? And if we were to regenerate just the cockpit using our mask at a very high denoising strength without changing our prompt, you can see why it produces subpar results. And it's because it's trying to figure out how I can make the shape that's been given me without any of the context around it. It doesn't know that it's zoomed in on the cockpit. It just sees this kind of gray blob in the middle of the screen. It's trying to figure out how to make that look like a space fighter. And so it does a really good job at that, but this would actually look really bad in the context of the entire image, which we know about, but the AI model doesn't. Now we can always get around that by doing low denoising strengths so that the AI model doesn't have as much freedom, isn't generating as much new content, and as a result is really just kind of doing smaller details to match the prompt. But a better way to think about how to work around this is by changing the prompt itself when we're doing a smaller generation. When we're focused in just on this area of the space fighter, we're not really prompting for an entire space fighter. What we want to see is a cockpit and a pilot maybe. And at high denoising strengths, again, we actually are able to get very close to this. And we even see the hint of a pilot inside of the ship, which is really, really cool and very nice detail. The high denoising strength gives us that flexibility where we can see these very nice details on the cockpit, but it does require changing the prompt around in order to match what you want to see. However, this isn't the only way that InvokeAI offers tools to make smaller detail regeneration easier. With ControlNet on the canvas, anytime you have an area selected inside of the box and the Save Box Region option enabled, you can simply click the Import Image from Canvas button to have that bounding box clip the contents and pass it in as a control image. In this case, I've passed in a depth control image. Now when we generate, even at high denoising strengths, that shape is maintained. Obviously, a space fighter is going to give different results than a cockpit, but this is one way that you can do much stronger regeneration without having to fight the prompt as much in order to maintain your structure. But we've also gotten a little ahead of ourselves. Let's go back to the basics of the generation methods that can be used with the bounding box. When the bounding box is over a completely transparent area of the canvas, it'll generate a new image using your prompt. When the bounding box is over an area that already has end-to-end pixel data, it'll use all of that bounding box area as the initial image if no mask is passed in. If you pass in a mask using the brush tool on the mask layer, the system will create a new image using the bounding box data and composite the new information into the selected area. There is an option to toggle inside of the toolbar that lets you preserve the mask area instead, and that would just result in the inverse of this. It would paste in everywhere that the mask is not selected. But by default, the system is going to use the mask data to determine where you want to regenerate content. We'll talk a little bit more about compositing options in just a moment. Lastly, if the bounding box is over an area of the canvas that has empty space, as well as an existing image, the system will use the existing image to inform how to infill the empty space. And basically that just means put some new color data or content into that empty area. And then it will use that area to composite a new regeneration into the image. And this, again, is very useful for extending an image and changing the aspect ratio or composition of your resulting content. I'd like to thank one of the InvokeAI community members, TechNerd, for putting together this graph, which is a really helpful way of visualizing all of the different infill techniques. The options available inside of the canvas include tile, which is the second option, patch match, llama, and CV2. A solid color infill can be achieved by drawing using the brush with the colors that you want to see. Kind of imagine that composition and then masking that area. And the type of results you get from a transparent background can be achieved by just passing in a white set of brush strokes and doing that same technique of inpainting that area. I want to talk about one of the key features that's really important to get advanced high quality results from the canvas, and that's the scale before processing feature. What the scale before processing feature does is allows you to bring the bounding box and really focus in on a small area of details like a face or a specific character in the background and improve the quality of the regeneration by performing that at a higher resolution. As a reminder, most of the models that we're using have been trained to generate at a certain size. And so what ends up happening is if you generate a large image, sometimes the smaller details, if you have a character that's really far away from the viewer or smaller environmental details in the background, those sometimes have a much lower quality than the type of generations that you get when you have a close-up character or something that fills the entire image. So again, the technique here allows us to zoom in on a smaller area, like a 256 by 256 bounding box, manually upscale that to 768 by 768. And so in this case, we might have a mask around the face, regenerate the content at that larger resolution, and then push that back into the original image with all of that extra detail. This is a really, really good way of getting extra details and high quality background elements. Now, I mentioned earlier that when we're inpainting a specific area by using our mask to regenerate that area of content, that the system has a compositing process that it goes through in order to get this fit back into the original image. One of the options that's available is the mask adjustments option. When we select a mask, which is represented here by this black area, the entire image inside of the bounding box is going to get regenerated, but only the area that's selected is going to get pasted back in. By default, we do a blur on this mask when we're merging the new data into the original image. That's about 16 pixels outside of the mask selection area. And by default, that's a box blur, but you have the option to increase or decrease that, as well as change the blur type. In this example here, I've shown what 16 pixels and 32 pixels looks like. And largely, I think you'll find that it's the same. However, if you look at the original image where we had drawn the mask, you can see where the differences really are. Down at the bottom here of this bounding box, the 16 pixel version maintains the zipper, and because the 32 pixel blur is expanding more significantly beyond the edge, it actually is regenerating that entire area. You can also see on the corner here of the shoulder, there's a little bit of a curve that is wiped out and made straight with a larger compositing blur. Typically, I recommend leaving this at the default unless you're really having a very specific use case for increasing or decreasing that and know what you're doing. But this is a great tool to play around with and experiment just to know how to use these options a little bit better. The other option that's important to understand with compositing is the coherence pass. When we're regenerating an area or expanding an image inside of the unified canvas, we're actually doing two generations. The first generation takes the area inside of the bounding box and regenerates it with the denoising strength that you have set. That is then composited into your original image based on the mask settings that you have, and then run through an image-to-image process again. This second pass is done at a low denoising strength, and it's primarily meant to clear up any rough edges or seams that might have been introduced in the infill process or the regeneration itself. And then that second image is composited into your original. There are three options for how this second pass is generated. Unmasked, which is effectively running an entire image to image on the entirety of that new content. Masked, which does a second round of inpainting. And mask edge, which takes the edges of your original mask and just regenerates those. Mask edge is what was originally in InvokeAI in 2.0 to 2.3, and unmasked is the new default in 3.0 and later. I have personally found that the unmasked coherence pass generates a much more seamless image with qualities that I prefer. However, you have the option to play around with how this is generated to see what works for you. At the end of the day, if we're comparing these three images, they look very similar, but to the trained eye, when you're toggling between them, you'll notice some differences, and I encourage you to play around with it yourself to see the difference in your results. So now that we know some of the basics, let's jump into Invoke and go through the process of using the canvas to generate some new content. We'll go ahead and create an image that we can use to get started with a new generation on the canvas. Okay, so text to image generated some content for me, and it kind of matches what I put in, but it isn't really what I was going for. And so I think I might be better served by starting on the canvas and maybe using image to image. Let's give that a shot. So I'm going to go to my unified canvas, and I'm going to make sure that I've got a 1024 by 1024 area selected since I'm using SDXL. And now I'm just going to brush in a general idea of what I was looking for. So I'll start with maybe a maroon background, and then I'll do some light brushing on the canvas. All right, I've got a general idea here of what I'm looking for. I'm going to add maybe distant third-party perspective. Set that to 1. And we'll maybe do a run at 0.6, 0.7, and 0.8. Okay, so of all of these, this one kind of got the idea, although it created a alien in the focus. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to accept this, and then we'll just brush this alien out and regenerate this again. And what I'm doing here is I'm just kind of giving it some of that color information that is referenced elsewhere. And what I'm going to try to do now is I'm going to do another image to image pass on this. And hopefully now that the alien's out of here, it'll provide some clarity of focus on the performer. But if not, it'll still be fine. I'm going to do a couple of generations, maybe at 0.45, 0.5, and then 0.65. All right, so the higher generation was needed in order to get the kind of look that I was going for. We've got a gentleman standing up here, and I'm trying to decide if I like that. I mean, I think there's something cool about this notion of maybe this character being drawn to the alien on stage. It's a little bit of an interesting dynamic here. Yeah, I think I'm going to keep it. I like that. There's something about this that kind of speaks to me, so I'm going to accept that. So now we've got an interesting composition. There's definitely some stuff going on that we want to focus on, but the area that I want to regenerate now is I can barely see this person in the background. If we zoom in, I mean, there's really not a lot of details. These people on the stage are kind of like, you know, blobs of nothing. They don't really look coherent. And so I'm going to maybe focus in on just this piece, and I'm going to regenerate our singer and the people in the background. And what I need to do now, my bounding box is kind of giving me this warning up on the top left that's saying you're doing a generation at 256 by 256. And so what I need to do is I need to go down to my scale before processing, and I need to turn this up to 1024 by 1024. I could actually do it a little bit higher if I wanted to. This really just kind of up to you, and if you know what your model is trained on, making sure that you're passing in the width and height that would match its general training data. In this case, I think this will be good, and I'm going to go back up to my denoising strength, and we'll do 0.65, 0.6, 0.55, and 0.5. And see what we get. This is the one that I like the most, I think, out of all of these. This one's particularly amusing, though. I think the character just overall looks a little bit more like the alien that I had in mind. Although I do want to do some additional detailing there. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my snap to grid off so that I can really focus my bounding box and get the composition that I want here. And then I'm going to select this head. I think everything else looks okay. And then I'm going to take out some of the prompt again because I am focusing on this small area, and this prompt really needs to focus on that. So we'll say, you know, an opera singer stands in the spotlight on stage. Like lighting. Do a couple at 0.55, and maybe a couple at 0.6. Now that we've got our options here, let's find which one I like the most. It's probably fit the best with what I was thinking. And now I can add in some of the details that I wanted to come in and add. So something that I really want to do is give this alien maybe some dark purple tentacle like hair. I'm recognizing it's going to be somewhat difficult to get, but I really want to do so. So I'm going to do a couple of layers here. And what I'm doing right now is I started with the darker color in the background. This is a traditional painting technique. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to pass in enough information about depth so shadow and highlights, so that when the model comes in to regenerate this area, it really knows what I'm going for. It knows the shape of the object. It kind of picks up on the concept of, okay, this is where the highlights are, this is where the shadows are. And then I'm really able to pass in a much more coherent idea of what I'm going for so that it can work with that. So I'm going to highlight the left side of this. Do a little bit of shadow here. And now I'm going to regenerate just that area. Some of the head. And we'll keep the denoising strength in the lower regions here so that it doesn't overinterpret that into something else. So we'll do a couple at 0.45 and then maybe a couple at 0.55. So this is one of those areas where, because of the blur on my mask adjustment, it went a little bit outside of that area that I had originally masked. So again, if you're dealing at very, very small resolutions like we are right now, you might run into that. And I think we're also seeing it blur up into the top of the bounding box as well. So we're gonna have to come back and fix some of those seams later if we take any of these. But I really do love the result of some of these quite a bit, and I think I'm going to take one of them. I think this is the one that it kind of speaks to me the most. It really has the shape of the hair that I was thinking about. It's kind of like a single tendril, and it comes down and looks like hair. So I'm going to do that. And then what we're going to go ahead and do is just fix the seam that kind of crept in there with our blur. And again, you know, if I wanted to avoid this in the first place, I could turn down the blur on my mask adjustments so that it didn't blur up into the edge. But for now, I think this is it's a really good generation, and so we're going to keep it this way. And again, it is going to go ahead and blur a little bit of that top of the head as well. But I'm also okay with that. I think it's actually giving me some options here to choose from. I like this one that kind of has these like ears coming off. Now we're zooming back out, and I know that we spent an inordinate amount of time on the detailing of this one character, but again, we're really going for a very specific output, and we wanted to pass in the detail for this character down on stage. We'll go ahead and turn Snap to Grid back on, and we'll take a look at our final image. I'm noticing one thing that I don't really love about the composition of this image, and that's really just the kind of aspect ratio. It seems like there's a lot of wasted space, and so I'm just going to drag my bounding box up to the top. I'm going to change the ratio to free so that I can move the bounding box however I want. And I'm going to use the delete or erase bounding box button to just chop off that top there. And that really just kind of gives us the final image that we're looking for, which is a very focused composition of this character looking down at this alien on stage. And I think that looks really good. In fact, I may take off some of the bottom as well, just for matching up to the rule of thirds. And, you know, if we really want to make this fit what we're going for here, we probably want to go ahead and extend this a little bit more so that the composition really lines up. I'm going to do some quick measurements here just to see. We've got this character about this far in. We want maybe about 2 more blocks so that this character also has that. Now, because I'm extending, I want to make sure that I've got enough in here to line up with this. And I'm going to lock my ratio here, and that'll actually pass the ratio down into my scale before processing as well. And I'm going to increase this up because the model size can deal with it. And we'll hover right around that 1024 by 1024. Maybe we'll bring it down just a little bit. Yeah, this is perfect. And then I'm going to use patch match. It's kind of the old school go-to for Invoke users. I could use Llama or CV2 if I wanted to, but I think patch match is going to work out relatively well given the shape of the edge here. I kind of want to just extend these colors a little bit. And we're going to want to make sure our denoising strength is sufficiently high. I'll do probably 0.84. And that's just so that the new details that are added in have enough transformation to kind of fit into the image. And we'll go ahead and invoke. Okay, so this one is pretty funny because it added like a, I don't know, some kind of host and some dancer up on top of this guy. We don't like either of those. This one looks the best. I want to fix up this top right area a little bit because there's some tentacles that came in, which should be pretty easy to do with my brush tool. I do like the lights though, so we'll keep those and I'll just brush over this area here. There's some people that slipped into the aisle and we'll maybe take those people out. Select those areas. And I'm really what I'm doing, just to kind of give some explanation, I'm picking colors from the image using the C key. The C is my color picker. I'm using the Q key to switch to my base so I can paint over those areas. So this is a quick way. The Q key is a quick way between switching around from a brush to a mask. And I'm just trying to color correct for some of the areas to get the kind of final look I'm going for. I'm going to turn down the denoising strength to maybe about 0.7, and we'll go ahead and invoke. I just got to stop on this one for a second because what is this? What is this? Where did this guy come from? This is absurd. This is why I always do a couple of iterations, because sometimes it's the seed that just throws it all off and makes something weird there that you weren't going for. This one's actually perfect. I think this matches exactly what I was looking to see. It's a weird little bit of a ray of light up here in the top right corner. Yeah, maybe this one's actually better. I think switch between these two and just see. Yeah, no, I like this one better. And maybe we'll just correct for this. Here, we'll switch to our base layer. Try to replicate that coloring. And then we'll leave a pretty low denoising strength and give a couple of iterations there. Perfect, we'll accept that. And now we've kind of got exactly what I was going for. Save that to our gallery, and you know, compared to our original generations, which did not match my conception at all of what I was going for, we actually did get into a really good spot this generation. It looks great. Now, if I were using this for storyboarding, movie concept or something like that, I might go in and you know, add some additional details. There might be some characteristics for characters that we have that we want to make consistent across the storyboard. But for our purposes today of just demonstrating what we can do, this is a perfect output. This is probably a really good start for a romantic space operatic drama. Love it. Now that I've gone through a really deep demonstration, what I'll do now is just have some fun, generate some stuff, speed this up so that you can watch the process. But if I'm using anything that's new, I'll probably slow it down and walk through what I'm adding and thought process behind it. But otherwise, sit back, relax, get ready for an overdrive. All right, so I'm going to slow this down because I've got a general rough sketch of something that I'm thinking about, some kind of like mage, and it's a very, very rough sketch. But I like the rough shape of that, and what I want to do now is use a control net. I'm going to go ahead and use the SDXL soft edge control net, for this. Soft edge is going to look at the edges and kind of blur them a little bit. Because this is not a really fine, detailed sketch where I want it to adhere exactly to what I've drawn, I'm mostly going to use this for the early structure. And so I'll bring the instep percentage down to 40, maybe 50 or so. I'm going to hit import image from canvas. That'll bring that in and run the pre-processing on the image. So it's kind of finding those edges and details. And again, I'm doing this early on because I want it to bring the structure in, but I do not want it to stick to this exactly because it's be crappy sketch. And then we'll go ahead and write our prompt in. And because I've got this controlling the structure, I can increase my denoising strength pretty significantly. I am just going to do a full image to image here. I'm not going to do Inpainting because I don't really care about much of this being maintained. I'm not worried too much right now about the black outline being maintained because I've passed that into the control net already and it's found those edges. I'm mostly just using this for general color regions as it's going through the denoising process. Now, there's a couple things slowing this down again that obviously didn't work out for me. I got a hat in every single one of these, and so that's coming directly from the word wizard. Wizards have hats. Anytime you use the word wizard in that prompt, it's going to have push it towards a hat. So I can add that to my negative prompt if I want, and I'll even upweight that so that it does not interpret that as a hat. The other thing I might consider doing, though, because of the varied poses in all of these, is I might bump up the percentage that this is controlling the generation to maybe 65. That way it's maybe more strongly pushing it towards the stance that I have desired. Although I did like this one particularly, and I could take this and go Inpaint over it, but I think I'm just going to try to at least go through one more pass of getting closer to this pose. So I'll delete these all and try it one more time. Okay, I'm going to stop that right there because I already see the hat, so I'm just going to do Yellow Mage of the Dunes, and we'll do Wizard hat. Although Wizard being in my negative prompt might drastically impact the vibe. Here, we'll give this a shot and see if we get what we want. Okay, there's actually some interesting things happening here. Okay, so these definitely map more to my initial drawing. Although I do think that the term wizard in the negative prompt has done a few things. It obviously took the hat away. It also pushed it away from being like an old white dude pretty hard, as we can see. This one actually looks really good. I'm going to go with this one. What I'm going to do here is an interesting little trick. So I put the wrong button there and clear my canvas here. I'm actually going to use the eraser tool on the base layer, and I'm going to erase out this kind of white spot in between. And the reason that I'm going to do this is because rather than having the existing color shape this, I want it to infill this area from the existing color of the composition, and it will kind of fill in the areas around that character based on my infill settings. Now, if we take a look at the infill settings, we've got, again, our tile, llama, CV2, and patch match. I think llama might work the best here for what we're going for. Llama is a model that really is trying to kind of fill in almost like a content-aware type fill. So we'll use that and see if that gets us what we're looking for. And if not, we'll go back to patch match. So as you can see, there are a lot of ways to really control the generation process and get what you're looking for from the tool. The best advice that I can give is to experiment and explore the entire canvas set of tools, because there are sometimes better ways of communicating your intent to the model. Prompts have a significant impact on the content that the model is going towards, and we haven't even yet touched on the power of image prompts on the unified canvas, which we'll do in a future video where we focus on image prompts specifically. However, whether you're drawing on the canvas to guide the structure and color, or using a control adapter to rigidly refine the structure and details of your generations, the unified canvas works together to help you get to a final generation that you're looking to see. Feel free to share thoughts on where we haven't covered the details that you'd like to see, or if there's a use case that you'd like me to dig into specifically in the future. All you need to do is put that in the comments, like this video, and then subscribe so that you get updated when we release a new video. You can also get updates by joining the Discord server. Use cases like this, tips and tricks, and more are regularly discussed. Stay tuned for more. We've got both more content and more features coming soon. We're really excited to build this with you, and we're looking forward to seeing what you create with Invoke. Until next time, take care and happy invoking.